companies around the world are boycotting Israel, and the media will not tell you about it. Well, some media will, and we will do that. Look at this article from Israeli media, Ynet, saying that the economic boycott of Israel is already here, according to a banker inside of the Israeli government. So let's read what they have to say. Speaking to Ynet, the banking executive observed that for now, Israeli-owned entities and companies are not transferring their funds abroad, though they are exercising extreme caution within their investments in Israeli firms. And globally, he says, we, Israeli business companies and owners, are becoming economically unwelcome, almost pariahs in some areas. Many companies are now at risk as international entities impose an informal boycott on Israeli companies and factories. This person says the government must immediately develop an emergency plan to rescue business entities from a situation that can become a genuine threat to the stability of the Israeli economy. In times of war, we need strategies not only to eliminate figures like Sinwar, though that is important, but also to protect and sustain some of Israel's major economic enterprises as well as small businesses. Now, the chairman of the Israeli Security Authority says that this actually has already been happening before the war in Gaza, but it's happening even more. He says even before the war, there was a decline in foreign investments in Israel, and the war has accelerated this trend. Foreign investors have withdrawn over 34 billion shekels from the Israeli stock market since the beginning of the war, 8 billion from equities, 14 billion from government bonds, 6 billion from short-term loans, and 5 billion from corporate bonds. And Israeli investors have borne much of this burden. So what's interesting about this is what is happening is exactly what U.S. politicians and the Israeli government together, because you know they're like this, tried to stop happening when they opposed the BDS. Now, this is proof of the law of attraction, that what you resist persists. The BDS, it stands for Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions, was a grassroots movement among companies not to do business with Israel because of the way that they were treating the Palestinians, were and have been. It was a response to the violence from the Second Intifada. Palestinian leaders realized they had a global reputation for violence, and they needed nonviolent action to inspire action on their behalf. They wanted to show the world we are not a violent people, but look at our plight. And maybe if you boycott Israel, our plight will get better. Sounds pretty reasonable. They came up with the BDS. Only U.S. lawmakers think that it is their job to protect the Israeli people, the Israeli government, not us, the Americans. So they literally wrote legislation. They wrote a law saying that it is illegal to boycott Israel. Why can't you boycott Israel? Isn't that your right? Do you have to like Israel? Is that a constitutional mandate? Here it is, the Combating BDS Act of 2019. This never became law, but in many ways, the anti-Semitism bill is this bill in sheep's clothing. And now, what did the Palestinians who promoted the BDS, what were their grievances that they wanted to get your attention about? Well, this comes from Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Platnick's book, Except for Palestine. Here's a simple list of what BDS wanted. Their grievances. This is not what they want. This is what they don't want. Is Israel's construction of the wall in the West Bank, continued expansion of Jewish-only settlements in the West Bank, unilateral annexation of East Jerusalem and Golan Heights, growing global refugee problem, Palestinian refugee problem, and Israel's discrimination against its own Arab, largely Palestinian citizens. These are things that they wanted your attention about. This is a list of grievances. Pretty stinking reasonable, right? And at first, the Zionist government ignored the BDS, and the media did too. But the media only covered violent Palestinian resistance, not nonviolent, of course, because as we established in the previous segment, they suck, until it started to gain traction. And then the media started to call it anti-Semitic. And then they went to lawmakers, not the media, but Israeli advocates, and asked to stop it in its tracks. Maybe you remember this. Ben and Jerry's joined the BDS movement, and lawmakers went after them like Elon Musk. Their parent company, Unilever, sold them because of this. Then Airbnb said they didn't want to list homes in the occupied West Bank, but they reversed that decision after they sued. Now, again, I know I'm always talking about against stakeholder capitalism. And this is definitely an example of businesses doing politics, which generally I'm against, but I am for their right to do it. I don't think that the government should tell them that they cannot express themselves and express a desire to not do business with Israel. They should have a right to do that. And in fact, that is what the courts decided in the end. They decided you cannot tell a company not to boycott Israel, because that is a First Amendment right. This movement, though, is alive and well, although the name is a little bit less popular. People don't really throw around BDS as they once did. Although I would be happy to do that. That's why I'm doing it right now, because I'd rather talk about peaceful protests rather than the violent protests that we got on October 7th. Absolutely. Just this week, Apple employees and shareholders issued an open letter urging the company to please stop matching employee donations to organizations connected to the Israel military action in Gaza and illegal settlements in the West Bank. This letter calls for an immediate investigation and the cessation of matching donations to organizations that support illegal settlements and the IDF right now, which is killing civilians. So will lawmakers get involved in that too and say you can't ask Apple to stop that? Apple's going to keep doing that. Say that shareholders maybe can't stop a donation. Will they do something like that, given how in the pocket they are for Israel? Which, again, leads to the question, why? Why do our lawmakers do such bidding for Israel? Why is that? Well, one obvious reason is something that we were told about just last week. I don't know if you caught this, but I'd like to highlight this content. Representative Thomas Massey on Tucker Carlson said this about how every Republican representative has an Israeli representative babysitter.
They're not registered.
Is there any other Republican who has your views on this?
Well, I have Republicans who come to me on the floor and say, I wish I could vote with you today. Yours is the right vote, but I would just take too much flack back home. And I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side. But that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, "I'll talk to my AIPAC person," and it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
It doesn't benefit anybody. Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
Have you seen any other country do anything like this? Like
no.
Russia obviously determines the outcome of our elections. We keep hearing that. Does anyone have a Putin guy that they talk to?
Not only do they not have a Putin guy, look, they don't have a Britain guy. They don't have an Australian guy. They don't have a Germany dude. It's the only country that does this.
I've said that, I tweeted this the other day. Thomas Massey is a national treasure.
Yeah.
And we should protect him at all costs. All of these other people have an AIPAC guy that they're in the tank for. They receive money from these guys, and they're handed money from these guys, and they're told what to do. They're told what to say.
Yeah.
They're told how to vote.
So he later points out how these Zionist government representatives don't always have even the people of Israel or people who are Jewish. They don't have their best interest at heart. They want war with Iran. Most Israelis do not want that, or nobody rational would want a war with Iran. But again, if what you resist persists, my most pessimistic assessment of this is that the U.S. and Zionist governments work to shut down a peaceful protest. And what did they get? A violent one on October 7th. And the Israeli economy will hurt anyway because they resisted BDS, because they continue to attack civilians, and Gaza is an unpopular war throughout the world. My next pessimistic assessment is also this, that the failing U.S. economy, the U.S. government, will be called upon, because in that screen that I showed you, when that banker said the Israeli government has to save us, has to do something about our failing businesses because of this war, I'm afraid that they'll ask the U.S. government to do that. We don't have it. You see the debt clock behind me. We can't afford it. We should absolutely be using our money to benefit the American people. But I think that maybe the American people will be asked to bail out the Israeli economy because these lawmakers with babysitters might make us. So again, that's pessimistic, but I'm just saying that was where my mind went. So let me know what you think of that.